On today's show, there are plenty of trade rumors to talk about involving the Cleveland Cavaliers because things are starting to heat up. We'll do that. Plus, the Cavs lost to the Suns, a pretty bad game on Friday night. We'll dive into all of it on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. And you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show and any other Locked On pod anywhere you get them. That means Apple, that means Spotify, that means on YouTube as well. If you're watching right now on YouTube, please do us a favor. Hit the thumbs up button and the notification bell as we get started, and make sure that you are subscribed wherever you might be listening to this show. And today's edition of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON, that is LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. On today's show, we will talk about the Cavs being crushed by the Phoenix Suns on Friday night in a game that had a lot of things that didn't go the Cavs' way. And we will also dive into a lot of the trade rumors. I want to begin today with the trade rumors because that is the stuff that I just think is a little bit more important. Like, yes, the Cavs lost the game 126-113 on Friday night. The Suns hit a ton of threes. I didn't think the Cavs had great effort levels. I think it was kind of an emotional letdown coming off of the win they had over the Lakers on Wednesday. We'll get into all of that coming up in segment number 2. This is going to be a 2-segment show today. But the trade rumor stuff is starting to really pick up. And I've heard a lot of stuff over the last 36 or so hours about where the Cavs stand, who they're talking to, what to necessarily expect. And as of right now, as of 11:51 in the morning on Saturday, January 31st, I believe a few things pretty strongly. I would be very, very surprised if the Cavs do not make a move. This has not always been where I have been on this stance. I think like a month and a half ago, if you would have said, hey, where do you think, are the Cavs for sure going to make a move? I would have said it's probably 50-50, and maybe the answer is leaning towards no, or if they do, it's going to be something that's on the margins. The name that I've heard more than I expected to has been DeAndre Hunter. And I know that a lot of people out there are reporting the same. And this is I think a poorly kept secret that Hunter's name is on the trade block. I have heard the Sacramento Kings a lot for Hunter. I've not necessarily heard the Lakers as much. I've heard them a little bit, but not a lot. The team that I have heard the Cavs be most connected to so far this trade cycle has been the Sacramento Kings. I have heard Keon Ellis. I have heard Malik Monk. I have heard Dario Saric as a name. I have heard a lot of different names, combinations of trades. I would keep an eye on something happening between the Cavs and the Sacramento Kings. And the more and more noise that comes out about this stuff, the more likely I think it would something to happen maybe sooner than later. The trade deadline is not until Thursday, but I don't know how long you can let these things fester, if you will. I don't know how long you can allow these things to just continue to be rumors and have guys try and play through it. I don't necessarily want to sit here and say that had an impact on the way the Cavs played against the Suns on Friday, because I have no idea about that. But you can't help but wonder maybe it did, because these rumors have now been out for a couple of days now. So DeAndre Hunter is the name that I have heard probably the most over the past 36 hours is a guy the Cavs are going to trade, that a guy that has been connected to the Kings from what my sources have told me over this time period. And I think it does make sense. And the Cavs would like to get Keon Ellis back. I think that is the number one, maybe not the number one guy on their board. But I think he is among the guys that are realistic targets. I do think he's a guy that is pretty high up there on their board for them. I've heard Dennis Schroder as well. I've heard Malik Monk. There's been some combination of these, 4 or 5 players from the Kings that could end up in Cleveland. If they do trade for Dario Saric, my expectation would be that he ultimately gets rerouted to a third team. I don't necessarily think that he's a guy the Cavs have any use for or are interested in trading for. I think that is more so of making the money of this type of deal work. So that's the latest that I've heard there. I have also heard Lonzo Ball being traded. Like, I've heard him connected to the Kings. I have heard him connected to a couple of other places. Like, he would, for the last month or so, I have gotten the feeling that the Cavs do need to make a move there. Like, Lonzo has very greatly underperformed this season. Like, he has been, I think, a big disappointment, it's fair to say, and he was very bad against the Phoenix Suns, and part of the reason why the Cavs lost that game. Again, not putting all the blame on him because that is incredibly unfair, but we will get to that coming up. But I do think they need to make some sort of move there. I think that they need to trade Lonzo Ball because I just don't think that he can be a helpful basketball player the way the Cavs need him to be. Like, he does a lot of things really well for them. He does. He rebounds really well for a guard, and the Cavs have needed that. And he is a magnificent passer, and the Cavs have needed that. But ultimately, Lonzo Ball is shooting in the 20%, and you can't have that on the floor. For as good as he can be at some of the other things, their offense falls off a cliff when he's out there, in large part because of his shooting. And that has been a big issue with them. That is something that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. And if they can find a way off of his contract, I do think it is wise at that point to try and maybe save a little bit of money, because the Cavs are $22 million over the second apron. And to be clear here, I do not anticipate that the Cavs are going to get under the second apron with these moves. That's not what this is about. Can they save some money with this type of stuff? I do think so. And I do think that could make some sense. But I don't think this is like, hey, this year has not gone the way it has expected to be. We're going to try and get out of the second apron. We're just going to dump DeAndre's contract as a salary dump. That's not what would be happening in a DeAndre Hunter trade. Lonzo Ball is a little bit different. That would be, I think, closer to a salary dump, especially if they can find a trade that works for DeAndre Hunter. Then I think it becomes a little bit easier if, say, they bring in two guys to also trade Lonzo Ball as part of a salary dump to get that money off the books. I think that's something that could make some sense for the Cavs. Now, what makes this all complicated from a Cavs perspective is the number of teams that I've gathered that have reached out to the Sacramento Kings. Like, I don't necessarily have all the specifics as far as who, or am I necessarily in a place to report that, but I do think, like, we are talking about somewhere between 8 and 12 teams that have called the Kings to make some sort of offer on Keon Ellis, who I think is probably the prize the Cavs are after most. So I don't know if this offer is going to be enough. I don't know what the Cavs will pivot to. I know that there's been some noise regarding DeAndre Hunter to the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm not sure how real that is. Like, that's just, I have heard the Cavs and the Kings connected far more than what I've heard between the Cavs and the Lakers so far during this transaction cycle. Of course, these things can change, and they can change very quickly. And if the Kings end up deciding, hey, there's an offer that we like better than what the Cavs are offering us for Keon Ellis, then the Cavs are going to have to find a way to pivot. Because I do think, again, with, 5 days now until the trade deadline arrives, I think it's much more likely than not that the Cavs are a team that will make a trade, whether it is Lonzo Ball, whether it is DeAndre Hunter. I think if the question was DeAndre, Lonzo, both or neither, I would probably pick both get traded between now and the trade deadline. The Cavs are in a position where they feel like they are still more than capable of winning the Eastern Conference. I think their play from December 22nd on does showcase that, no matter what happened in Phoenix on Friday night. But it's also clear that this roster as is not hitting its full potential, and I don't necessarily think that it will hit its full potential. Like, I do think that making a move is something that's paramount for the Cavs. I think they need to find some upgrades, because right now, and injuries are a big part of this, right now they just don't have enough playable players. DeAndre is not always a playable player. Lonzo Ball is very rarely at this point a playable player. And if the Cavs can find a way to get one other or maybe two other guys that they can count on in this rotation, then I think it would be a big deal for the Cavs. I think it would be a big win for the Cavs. So I do think that things are going to continue to ramp up between now and when the trade deadline arrives on Thursday at, I believe it is 3:00 Eastern time. I will have you covered with the latest right here at Locked On Cavs all the way through. As news breaks, I will have emergency episodes that pop up right here, wherever you're listening to this show. Now, the Cavs were in action on Friday. They lost to the Phoenix Suns. Let's talk about that game for a little bit next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. Puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You can pull up the Gametime app, pick an upcoming NBA game. Cavs are not home for a while. I think the next home game is February 11th against the Washington Wizards. That's a long time before, but that means you've got time to get tickets. So you can have your tickets for that game and any other Cavs game locked in within minutes. Plus, you do see the all-in price up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. And you will also be able to see the view from your seat before you're buying to help make your purchasing decision easier. You want to know what your view is going to look like. Gametime makes that possible. Everything's quick, stress-free, and simple from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON. That is LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, gametime.co, not .com. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game that everybody's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels like it's bigger than the one right before. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, if you're a new customer with FanDuel, bet just $5, get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Yeah, that's right. $5 bet. If it hits, $200 in bonus bets if you're a first-time customer with FanDuel. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the football season is over. It's the last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com today to get started. Thank you again for making today's edition of Locked on Cavs your first listen. And thank you to those of you that make Locked on Cavs your first listen every single day. As I mentioned earlier, the NBA trade deadline basically here, and we want to give you a free month of the new Everydayer Club to help get you ready for it. If you need a group chat to keep up with the chaos, join ours. The Everydayer Club gets you access to a group chat on Discord for just Cavs fans, plus national chats where you can hang out with fans from across the NBA. You can also get the ad-free version of this show, and if you sign up by the trade deadline on February 5th, you can use code DEADLINE, that is DEADLINE, to get your first month for free. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more. The Cavs did lose to the Phoenix Suns on Friday night, 126-113, in a game that was not as close as the final score. I believe the Cavs trailed by 33 points at some point in the second half in this one. Like the deep reserves played really hard in the fourth quarter, and they played some good basketball in the fourth quarter. Like, give those guys credit. Larry Nance Jr. was good. Tyrese Proctor was good. Naquan Tomlin had, I think, 4 fourth quarter dunks. Even Lonzo Ball had some good fourth quarter minutes. The minutes he had in the first 3 quarters were a big problem for the Cavs, though. But the biggest problem that the Cavs had in this game was the number of turnovers that they had. They finished the night with 23 turnovers. They had 16 turnovers in the first half alone. That is not a formula to win a basketball game, even if they forced a lot of Phoenix turnovers, although some of those turnovers were forced in the fourth quarter that didn't necessarily have the same impact that the Cavs' 16 first half turnovers had. The Cavs did a good job of that, but they did such a poor job of taking care of the basketball that kind of nothing else mattered. Like, when you pair that with the level at which the Phoenix Suns shot the basketball, because their second half offensive display was incredibly impressive. So the Suns in the third quarter alone were 7 of 10 from beyond the arc. In the second half of this game, the Suns were 14 of 21 from 3 and shot 72% from the floor. You're not going to win a basketball game when that happens. Now, is that all because the Suns were awesome offensively? No, some of it was bad defense, as it always is. Some of it was really, really good offense. And I think both things can be true at the same time. And that was unquestionably, in my opinion, the case on Friday night. But this starts with the turnovers, because the Cavs could never find any sort of offensive rhythm. And give Phoenix credit, they were very physical at the point of attack. The Cavs were very frustrated by that, and I think that the 4 technical fouls that the Cavs picked up in this game, 2 by Kenny Atkinson, who was ejected in the second half, 1 by Donovan Mitchell at halftime, 1 by DeAndre Hunter. I think that was a source of frustration that the Cavs were not getting foul calls. Like they entered the fourth quarter and they shot some free throws in the fourth quarter. But going into the fourth quarter, they had taken 2 total free throws, one of which was the result of a technical foul on Dylan Brooks for flopping, which was the right call. And I thought a funny way to just kind of describe how that game was going. But the Cavs went to and I think in that same span, the Suns went to the line 15 times. So I do think the Cavs were very frustrated by that fact, and they allowed that to get them out of sorts. Like they had a lot of turnovers that were, some of them were the result of being sped up, and you give Phoenix credit for that. Some of them were just silly passes, were lazy passes, or passes to nobody. Like it was a very out of sorts offensive effort from the Cavs. They shot the ball okay. But the other thing too that really hurt them in this game was the drop off when Donovan Mitchell left the floor. And to be clear here, Donovan didn't play well. In the first half, he was not very good. But in the first half, he was a +6. He played 17 minutes and 30 seconds. So that means there were 6 minutes and 30 seconds when he was off the floor. And the Cavs were trailing by 5 points at halftime. In that 6.5-minute stretch, the Cavs were outscored by the Suns by 11 points. And then in the third quarter, where everything went bad for the Cavs, Donovan Mitchell played 8.5 minutes. In those 8.5 minutes, he was a -4, which is not good. But the Cavs as a whole were outscored by 9 points in the 3.5 minutes that Donovan Mitchell sat. So like for the drop off between him and Lonzo Ball in this game, and I realize that they played some minutes together, and I'm not trying to put all of this on Lonzo because that's not fair. But the Cavs could not function offensively. Even like the worst version of Donovan Mitchell that we saw in the first half on Friday night was better than what Lonzo Ball was giving them, because at least the attention that Donovan draws offensively is something that can make it capable for everybody else to function, where when they don't have Donovan, and they very much miss Darius Garland in this game, when they don't have Donovan out there, it's just a really tough thing for them to navigate. Like they had 23 turnovers on Friday night. That's the most they've had in a single game at any point this season. They've had now 6 games where they've had 20 turnovers or more. Darius Garland has played in 1 of those games. So 5 of the 6 games they've had 20 plus turnovers. Darius Garland has not been active, has not been available. I don't think that's some coincidental thing. I don't think that it's oh man, like it's just happenstance that they struggle to protect the basketball and that their offense has not been nearly as good. Like I know that game against the Lakers, they look great because they were hitting shots at a really high clip from the first quarter on. And the Lakers defensively, I just don't think are very good. I just don't think it's coincidental that they've had these offensive struggles without Darius, and when they're missing Craig Porter Jr. as well, because like if you look at Lonzo Ball's minutes, when he's on the floor with Craig Porter Jr., it's actually pretty good. When he's on the floor without Craig Porter Jr., it's not very good. And that's not necessarily a pairing that you would think of as say, yes, like they have to be paired together. But for Lonzo to be on the floor, they kind of do. And I think we're near the end of the Lonzo Ball experience in Cleveland. I think that he's going to get traded inside the next week. So I don't think that this is going to be a long-term thing, but I do think that Friday night was a perfect encapsulation of the way that it's gone, because the Cavs did not play well before he was on the floor, but they played worse once he was on the floor. He's a -20 in the first 3 quarters in a game that did get out of hand in the third quarter because the Suns really shot the heck out of the basketball. But overall, like I think it's a game to flush. I do. I think it was a bit of an emotional letdown coming off of what happened on Wednesday night against the Lakers, where you have a 30-plus point win, where it's very clearly a different game in terms of emotion. Maybe they overlooked the Suns a little bit, who were on the second night of a back-to-back, who did not have Devin Booker in this game because of an ankle sprain. Like all of those things can be true, and they can all contribute to this. It's a tough way to start a long road trip. I don't want to say it makes Sunday's game against the Blazers a must-win, but it's certainly closer to a must-win game than it should be at this point in the season, just because if you look at the rest of this road trip, the Clippers, who did lose to Denver on Friday night, are playing great basketball. the Cavs should win that game. Especially because the Kings will look much different that day than they did the first time these two teams played, because the trade deadline is between now and then, and the Kings will make some significant moves before that happens. And then it wraps up with the Denver Nuggets, who got Nikola Jokic back and have looked awesome even without him. So I do think this is a tough West Coast road trip that did not get off to a good start for the Cavs. They have to find a way to bounce back on Sunday, and I will have you covered right here after that one here at Locked On Cavs. So I appreciate you hanging out with me, and I appreciate you guys being patient. I wanted to record an episode on Friday, but this has been, on a personal note, a very, very exhausting week for me. There's been a lot that's been going on, some family stuff that I have unfortunately had to deal with over the past week or so. So I wanted to get it recorded Friday night. I didn't have it in me. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me and letting this be a little bit of a later episode and a little bit of a shorter episode. But I'm hoping that by after the game against the Blazers on Sunday, things will be back to normal as far as Locked On Cavs goes. So as we get out of here on YouTube, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and the notification bell, and make sure you are subscribed wherever you might be listening to the show. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that is anywhere else. And I will be back on Monday talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.